I'm now in conversation with Sumit Nagpal, who's the CEO and co-founder of an organization called Cherish Health. They have offices in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and also in Liverpool. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk about his work. But I want to begin by finding out a little bit about Sumit's background, how he got into this in the first place. How long have you been involved in healthcare, or were you doing something completely different before?
So my entire career, and frankly, the way I was even brought up has been all about healthcare. I've been a serial entrepreneur for the past 25 years. This is my fifth company, and every one of those has been about what you would describe today as digital health. We started building electronic medical records in my first company before we knew what those were in the early 90s. We started integrating data from multiple systems, first inside the four walls of a single hospital, and then integrating data across hospitals around the world in the mid 90s, before we understood the word interoperability and before you could just type a web address and access a resource from anywhere around the world. We did this before we had high-speed internet. We were moving medical images and CT scans and MRIs around from countries into various locations in the United States for second opinion consultations, and also doing live video conferencing for second opinion consultations in the mid 90s. That work led to a very successful period in the next company where we built web-based technologies for very large health IT companies. So we were in many ways the Intel Inside for quite a few, 18 very large healthcare IT companies. We helped them move their technologies to the web. And on the heels of that, wound up launching the next initiative, which was all about integrating patient data from wherever it existed, from pharmacy, from laboratory, from imaging, hospitals, GP surgeries, wherever the data existed, building that into a longitudinal medical record, what today you would describe as health information exchange. Again, in the early days of when all of this was starting to become a really recognized as a necessity for improving outcomes and improving the cost of care. I wound up selling that to a medical diagnostics company, where the idea was that now if we could use all that data to integrate information, not just from where you've already received care, but get real-time information from blood-based testing that becomes actionable immediately, that we could actually intervene early and prevent higher acuity, that we could actually intervene early and reduce the cost that emerges when things go unattended for too long. And so that became the basis for the next entire phase of our work as a team. That then led to what I wound up doing for about 2 years, which is working initially for Accenture as the global lead for digital health, global lead for digital health strategy. My remit was to work with companies like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and Facebook, and also the big telecommunications giants, companies like Comcast, and also big retailers, organizations like Walgreens, Boots, Walmart, CVS, and others, and really help join up big tech, big retail with healthcare, help them understand where there was value that they could bring to healthcare, and help healthcare organizations understand how they could benefit from a very different way of engaging with consumers and a very different scale of engaging with consumers. That really led me to become the GM for health innovation at Comcast. The work that we did at Accenture very naturally led into that. And by the end of 2019, it was very clear that there was an opportunity to launch a digital health platform that moved care into the home, where people live, where people work, where people play, and do that with sensing technology that was very advanced. And so we spun out of Comcast and launched a company called Cherish Health. Cherish Health is very new, launched in October of 2019. And our focus is to use advanced sensors, artificial intelligence, medical evidence, and what we describe as human touch to enable people to live better lives and to enable care where they happen to be.
Okay, well, that's obviously very timely in the current coronavirus situation. You must have a sense of foresight, it sounds like, from all your previous work in this sector. And I'm very pleased that you're able to contribute something to our discussion on the current debate about the impact of coronavirus on physical and mental health. So, Cherish Health, are you focusing on people with medical conditions, or is this something very general for the wider public, preventative healthcare, in other words?
So without going into too much detail about what we will launch in the future, we are very much focused on specific medical conditions. We are focused on helping people with specific conditions that wind up bringing them into hospitals, into A&E frequently, helping detect those and rising acuity while they're still at home, and then helping them manage those conditions while they're still at home, reduce the impact of and the disruption in their daily lives from having to wind up in an ambulance frequently, and also help reduce the pressure on the organizations that actually serve them in inpatient and acute settings. Right? So our focus is very much medical rather than consumer at this moment.
Ah, okay. Well, you fit in very well with some of the other panelists that we've got involved in this webinar and also in the previous webinar. I'll give you a couple of examples. One of the previous panelists was a guy called Chris Barker, who's a CEO and founder of Spirit Healthcare in the UK. I don't know whether you know them, but it's basically a very similar mission to yours, and the clinical value of the work that they do is basically keeping people out of hospital and allowing them to, or enabling them to be able to look after themselves better. And in the current webinar, which starts in a little while, we have Shane Fitch, and she's based, her company is based in Spain. I think she lives in Portugal herself, but her company specializes in providing home-based care for people with pulmonary conditions. And Lucia Panese, she has a flagship project called Rehability, which is designed to use games technology, consumer technology, to be able to provide proper physiotherapy at home rather than having to go to a specialist institution. So you're right on message. So how are things in Cambridge, Massachusetts at the moment as far as a lockdown and social isolation is concerned?
Well, things are exactly as you described, socially distanced, locked down in many ways. We happen to be in a moment of extreme urgency at Cherish Health, however. We accelerated the launch of one of our technologies, an advanced biosensor. I'm actually wearing one. It's a wearable patch.
Okay.
And I will hold one up in a moment.
Okay.
The wearable device is designed to be a sensor that you wear for short periods of time, a week to 7 days, 5 to 7 days at a time. And you wear it when there is some evidence of increased risk. There are 3 versions of this sensor. One that is already FDA certified and CE marked, and the next 2 that are going through the same regulatory approval process. These turned out to be very timely because the biomeasures that these sensors detect are, in fact, respiratory rate, temperature, your blood oxygen, SpO2, from a wearable device, a patch, a bandage, rather than something like a watch or something that you stick on a finger,
Hmm.
bandage that you can wear all the time. And so you can get continuous values of your respiration, your temperature, and your SpO2. And
Okay.
in addition, the device also has heart rate and EKG continuously. So what we realized very early in this pandemic was that if we could accelerate production and bringing these devices to market in volume, we might be able to help mitigate the risk that people face themselves when they go into hospital settings to receive care. We could help mitigate the risk that they impose on others around them while they're in public settings. And we might be able to take some of the pressure off emergency rooms and hospitals by enabling high fidelity monitoring in place where people live,
Mm.
so that people with moderate to low to moderate symptoms, people who don't have difficulty breathing, people who don't need to be in an ICU with a ventilator, which is a very large majority of the population that actually is tested positive or has symptoms that indicate that they have coronavirus. Very large percentage of the population has mild to moderate symptoms, and they can in fact be safely cared for and treated away from hospital settings.
Mm.
So really, the intent here is to increase social distancing, to promote social distancing on the one hand, and provide care to people in their own homes or wherever they live,
Hmm.
um, and do so safely with real-time data so that if something starts to go wrong, we can intervene very rapidly.
Yeah.
One of the challenges with coronavirus is that when individuals deteriorate, people who have more severe forms of the disease, when they deteriorate, very frequently that happens rather quickly.
Mm.
And so we have inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria that address those challenges. We've worked with clinicians very, very quickly, um, at quite a large scale, both in the US and the UK, and now also in places like the UAE and India,
Mm.
where the care pathways that drive all of this have been vetted, validated, adopted by clinicians in all these geographies,
Mm.
and and these are evidence-based. And so, really, the idea is, what can we do to mitigate the current crisis, especially around surges, especially around hospital utilization, and especially around transmission?
Yeah, I think that's very, very, very important. And if it were true, and I don't know whether there's any clear evidence to either way, if it were true that people with coronavirus who are in an infectious stage uh, were already displaying some symptoms, then it would be a brilliant technology to allow people to continue their normal daily work, knowing that they weren't a risk to other people. I think one of the issues that seem to be apparent is that it's quite likely that coronavirus is infectious when people are asymptomatic. And this is one of the problems that's attracting a lot of attention for the development of a vaccine and testing equipment to see whether people have already had coronavirus, to allow them to resume their daily lives. But in the meantime, we're in this situation where a lot of people are in an environment that they're totally unused to, an unprecedented environment, which is not just unhealthy for them, it's damaging to their mental health as well. So I think it's a great opportunity to have this discussion, and I appreciate you giving your time today to interview me. I will be publishing our conversation on the web and also on the ISDM website so that we can share it with other people. And I very much hope that you will join in the online discussion tomorrow, which will be at the same time, but on a different platform. So you will get an invitation, if you haven't had one already, to participate in that. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thank
And
you. I enjoyed our conversation,
yeah,
and I will be there.
thank you very much. And enjoy the rest of your day. Okay,
Thanks.
bye-bye.
Likewise.